Welcome back, folks, for a new episode of Leaked. Now, disclaimer before we start. Today's vehicle, or today's leak episode, is very fresh, right off the press. So it's not like the previous 3 leak episodes I put out, because the Krivslovsky's KV4, the T71 CMCD, and the T45, those vehicles are already added to the game client. So they are in your computer if you have downloaded 9.15. So they are in your computer, but you cannot access them just yet. So it's pretty much set in stone. Whereas this vehicle is fresh, it's new, and based on the current stats, it's super OP. So it's almost brokenly OP. And I highly doubt that these preliminary stats are going to make it into the actual final version of the vehicle. But let's take a look. So today we'll cover the Object 257. So this is going to be a special tier 10 Russian heavy tank. Yes, a lot of Russian heavy tanks, premium, special. But this is like the 15th, 14th. It's basically a pre-prototype to the Object 260. That's right, folks. We have 3 versions of the IS-7. Wow, we have 3 versions of the KV4, now the IS-7. How many versions of the IS-3? Like 2? I don't remember, whatever. So, yeah, 3 versions of the IS-7. And this vehicle is likely going to be coming from Clan Wars reward. So it's not from personal missions where people will rig for it if they see the stats. But it's basically IS-7 mixed with a T-22 medium tank. Yeah. Broken. Stupidly broken. But here, let's cover the history first before we take a look at the stats. So here's some history. The IS-7 is 6 or 7 prototypes. One got burned down, and it's not really the IS-7. It's mostly like different prototypes mixing to one. So the Object 260 is the first prototype, and it's basically a wooden model. It's not really the Object 257's place, if you will. So the Object 257, the 258, and 259 were brainstorming ideas before the start of the IS-7. So here you can read, but it's basically a paper tank. So it's like the original shape they wanted for the IS-7, but they never made it. So it's basically non-existent, but you can see the timeline. So after the siege of Leningrad lifted, the Kirov plant focused back onto the ISU-152, and the tank designers returned to experimental plant number 100. So they came up with a new heavy tank design. So basically, the father of KV series, the Kiloman Veloslav series, Mr. Yosef Kutin, he was the head of the design of the Object 260 program. So he came up with most of the designs, and the Object 257 is pre that stage, if you will. So in 1945, you have the first wooden mock-up of the Object 260, not the 257. So coming from the 257, 258, and 259, they came out with the Object 260, but it's made of wood. And that's the version of the tank in the game for the first season personal mission reward. That's connection of history. And they canceled the project, so they never built a real prototype out of it. So later on, after a year, new guys, this guy right here, and this guy right here, started the Object 260 program again. So they figured that the 1,200 horsepower engine was not functional enough onto the vehicle, so it doesn't work out properly, and that's why the whole model failed a year before. So they came up with the 1,050 horsepower engine, redesigned the engine housing, added more armor, trialed the 130 millimeter rather than 122 upgrades. So that's the prototype to the real IS-7 at tier 10. So basically, the documentation for the Object 257, 258, and 259 were sparse. So it's hard to find the blueprints of these vehicles, and I can't really find them. So I only found the pictures of the 260, and that's the earliest prototype, the actual prototype, not blueprints. So yeah, you can take a look, but quick history. So here is the first prototype. As you can see, the turret is somewhat like the Object 777 Stage 2 because of this unmanned aircraft, anti-aircraft mini turret on the back of the main turret. So if you take a look at the Object 777, looks pretty much the same, but the in-game model for this vehicle is shaved off of this mini turret. So this is the Object 260 that you know that was introduced like a year and a half ago. And here is the main version, the second prototype to the Object 260 designs. So this is the 1947-48 version of the tank, which is the IS-7 that you know at the normal tier 10 spot after the T10 or the IS-8. And yeah, no pictures of the actual 257 or 258 or 259 because those were blueprints and Russian bias, no data. Error 404. Alright, so here is the actual IS-7 in trials. They tested it. They passed the trials, but the main reason that this vehicle was never implemented is because, heavy tanks were going out of style, becoming obsolete to the T-54s, then T-62s, and then T-64s. So no need for a super heavy tank. It takes up a lot of resources. It's slow. It's bulky to transport, and it's hard to manufacture. And just in case of a nuclear war, it's not quick enough to produce a lot of these vehicles, whereas you can produce a lot of T-54s to start the combat. So, yeah, this vehicle was scrapped, but some of the technologies were taken from it. So they were put onto the T-10 and later on to, the medium tanks. So not everything is lost. But here is the in-game model, the early renders of the Object 257. So it looks like the Object 260's turret, but it's more like the Object 253. So it's like the IS-6 turret because the cupola's on top. So the commander hatch and the loader hatch. So this looks like the IS-6 turret, somewhat, but still has the pike-shaped nose. And what's interesting about this vehicle, what I notice, is the suspension. This looks like volute spring suspension, which is unusual on Russian tanks because they use torsion bars for later parts of the vehicles. They use Christie suspension on the early vehicles, but they use torsion bar on the later vehicles, and this used volute spring. So it looks like the Sherman suspension, which is pretty weird. And I cannot find the actual diagram or blueprint of this vehicle. So, okay, I'll take your word for it, but that's kind of interesting. So when did they take the Shermans or the M6 designs and fuse it onto their vehicle? Nobody knows. But as you can see right here, this vehicle has a pike-shaped nose with a V-shape hull design that's like the T-22 medium. Now, I never saw anything mentioning the combination of the T-22 design project with this vehicle, but looks a lot like it, right? So this is basically a larger version of a T-22 with a bigger gun and thicker armor. It's a heavy tank. Controversy, but where is the Dushka or the KPVT, large caliber anti-American anti-aircraft machine gun? So the 14.5 millimeter, no machine guns on top. It does have a log. So yeah, it's a large T-22 fused with a Object 260. Pretty broken. So here are the collision models. I mapped out all the armor areas, and it's pretty good. So the turret is 350 at the front, so pretty thick. It's 250 for the mantlet center, no armor underneath. It's 150 for the mantlet's edge, but there's armor underneath. So it's 150 mantlet with 350 for the turret. So you're not going to penetrate this mantlet on the edge, or not even in the center some of the time. And the turret is pretty strong. The frontal plate is IA7 or Object 260, so going from 240 in the middle of the beak to 300 to the sides, and lower plate is about 225, but it's a V shape, so smaller area, surface area for you to hit. So yeah, pretty crazy. And notice that the suspension is acting as additional space armor on the sides, as you can see here. So not just the 20 millimeter of tracks, you have more armor, quote unquote, for the suspension in place to cover up the lower part of the hull. So it's 25 degrees on the middle part, or 45 degrees on the middle part, and 25 degrees on the lower part. So shooting at the sides underneath the tracks is just track damage or even miss. So don't even think about it. The middle is about 150-ish between the tracks, so between the coiled springs, but somewhat of a small target. So if you shoot the space side armor, it's likely going to bounce. If you shoot the top, it could penetrate, so you have to hit this area with a large caliber gun. Shooting the side of the turret is likely going to bounce because 260 millimeter. So, but you do have a weak spot or two weak spots on top of the turret. So the commander and the loader hatch, which looks a lot like the IS-6. So 150 millimeter rounded, but not that much. The rear of the turret is 100-ish. The rear of the hull is about 100-ish. So, and take a closer look because you can see that there is weak armor underneath the main hull armor for the sides, but it's 100 millimeter. It's sloped downwards, and this vehicle is pretty low in profile, so most of the vehicles are shooting downwards into the side armor, which is also sloped downwards, which is cover up with space armor, which is auto bounce. So just don't even think about it. Oh, it's crazy. And here is the frontal shot comparison between the 257, the 260, and the IS-7. So here you can see the turret is mostly auto bounce for here, auto bounce for here. This part is 250-ish, 240-ish rounded, so it's hard to penetrate, but it's less strong than the Object 260 turret because, as you can see, rounded. There is a shot trap right here, but I never got it to pen, so this shot trap is okay. And this cupola right here is rounded, so you have to hit on the base of this cupola. If you hit at the top, it's auto bounce. So yeah, slightly weaker turret and not as strong as of Cheek, I guess, because, or you could steal shot trap right here. I don't know, but yeah, two turrets were not that strong compared to the IS-7 because the IS-7 has impenetrable turret front. You cannot penetrate this turret. No way with a regular gun firing normal shells. Not even fire a gold shell will penetrate the IS-7. So this turret is insane. The mantlet is super thick. The mantlet's edge is also super thick. Don't even think about it. And what I noticed from the Object 257, the 260, and the IS-7 is the earlier versions of the IS-7, the 257 and the 260, has weaker driver hatch. So you see this? This is only 45 millimeter. Same goes for the 260, but the driver hatch on the IS-7 is 140. So it's only 45 right here. So, but if you have a larger caliber gun, like 135 millimeter plus, it will overmatch the driver hatch. So if you're playing like the E4 or E3 or T30 or something, just shoot here. It will penetrate based on the caliber of your gun. And it looks like the top of the turret on the 257 looks like the weak spot, like the gun access port weak spot on the IS-3 or even the T10 sometimes, because that looks like 45 millimeter or 50 millimeter. If you have a large caliber gun, like 150 plus or 149-ish, you could overmatch this roof armor. And most vehicles are taller than this thing, so this turret doesn't look as strong as the 260 or the regular IS-7, but be a little bit more cautious when driving this thing. So small observations, just small. And here are the main stats for the 257. So it's going to be a special tier 10 Russian heavy tank. It's likely going to have a crew of 4 because the regular IS-7 has a crew of 5. The 260 has 4, so this is likely going to have commander, gunner, driver, loader, and that should be it. If it's not that, if it has a crew of 5, then it's 1 extra loader, but small detail. So it's not going to be sold for gold, but it will cost you or give you 22,500 gold if you sell it. I don't even know how that works, but just that's a value. So hit points wise, 2,100. It's below average. Has a 1,000 horsepower engine, so it's not historically correct. It should be 1,200, but oh well. Weighs 55 tons, so not as heavy as the 260 or the IS-7. Horsepower per ton ratio is 18.18, which is pretty good. Top speed is 50 km per hour. Reverse is 15. Hull traverse is 28 degrees per second. Turret traverse is 27.1 degrees per second. Terrain resistance is below average across the board, and a little bit more for medium terrain. So, yeah, that kind of sucks, but the horsepower per ton ratio overcompensates for this below average terrain resistance. So, that's fine. View range is 390, so 10 less than the average. Radio is 720, so standard. Hull armor 150 at the front, 140 at the sides, 70 at the rear. Turret armor is 350 at the front, 240 at the sides, and 100 at the rear. The gun is the same gun that's on the Object 260, so the 122 BL13-1 ammo count should be around 30-ish. So don't expect to carry a lot of ammo with this thing. Fires APCR, high explosive anti-tank, and high explosive. Normal penetration is 260. High explosive anti-tank is 340. So pretty good, but the alpha is low for a tier 10 heavy tank. So the average is about 500 or so. But the shell velocity is pretty quick for the APCR shell. So you can lead your shots a lot easier, pick off targets. Rate of fire is below average. DPM is about 2,300, so 2,500 with the gun rammer. It's passable, alright? It's passable. It's fair. But this tank is not about the gun, it's about the armor. So the reload is 11.411 seconds. Accuracy is 0.364, which is slightly below average. Aim time is 2.4 seconds, which is good for a Russian tank, but average. Gun depression is 5 degrees. Elevation is 15 degrees. So most of the stats are pretty much the same as the Object 260, other than the armor. So here are my final thoughts and opinions. So it's a slightly slower, quote unquote, brother to the Object 260, but it's still faster because better horsepower per ton ratio and better terrain resistance than the IS-7. It comes with a single serious advantage, and that's the V-shape hull. So this V-shape, yeah, you already saw this hull on the T22 medium, and a lot of players rage at the armor of that thing. So this is basically a larger version of a T22. Insane. So strength is the astounding hull armor. It's just insanely good. Great horsepower per ton ratio still for a large heavy tank. Top speed is good. Shell velocity is good. Dispersion and camouflage rating, base and presumed on the Object 260 because they share the same gun and the same size-ish. So I'm presuming that the dispersion and the camo is pretty good for this vehicle. The weakness is the less than average alpha, DPM, health, gun elevation and depression, and terrain resistance, and a little bit more weak spots than the Object 260 or the IS-7. But it's fine, I guess. So just like the Object 260, it's blistering fast. So it's fast for a heavy tank, and play this thing like a large, heavy, medium hybrid. So the high horsepower per ton ratio overcompensates for the slightly below average terrain resistance, and not as fast as the 260 because it's only 50 kilometers per hour top speed, whereas the 260 has 60 kilometers per hour top speed. It's the same gun, so slightly less DPM and accuracy, but same threat resistance, same health, same turret, ultraverse, same radio. So basically, an Object 260 that trades some weight, top speed, horsepower per turn ratio, DPM, accuracy, and 10 meters of view range for a V-shaped hull. So is it worth it? I think it is. So imagine if you fuse an IS-7 with a T-22 medium tank. It's currently it's not game-breakingly OP. It's not extremely OP because the turret. You still have a few weak spots, and it looks like you could be overmatched because the gun access port on top of the turret, the IS-6 like commander cupola or commander hatches and loader hatches. So the turret is obviously not as strong as the normal IS-7. But if you fuse the normal IS-7's turret with 130 onto this vehicle's hull armor and give it like 1,200 horsepower, that thing is extremely broken. That's game breaking open. Game breaking open, sure. That's game breakingly OP. Just no comparison. But at the current state, the turret is somewhat weak, but I'm not kidding you. This tank is still pretty strong, even with a weak turret, because you can just wiggle around and just throw off the shots by vibrating in place. So this is a still very powerful tank. It's just not game-breakingly godlike. So it's still pretty strong though. So trust me on it. But it's likely going to come from a campaign reward from Clan Wars. So you shouldn't be able to rig for it. Mostly. I don't know yet, but there are rumors. But yeah, don't want to become a T-22 fiasco, if you will. So hopefully not. But if this is going to be the second season of personal mission rewards, we're basically getting two IS-7s. So that's not fun or have a lot of variety. You're having two Object 260s. Blah. Yeah, so I think this is going to be a Clan Wars reward. And the stats are not going to stay because it's still pretty good. So still pretty OP. So we'll just have to see. But yeah, this tank is strong because basically a larger T-22 and just as fast, I guess, with more armor. Give it more armor. Give it more firepower. Ugh. But yeah, having an Object 257 with not having an Object 257, a lot of players will rage. So that's my 6 cents or 2 cents, whatever. But thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next. Fuck. Can't even talk. I'm still thinking about it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace. 静寂に咲くよ訪れたのは必然としての太鼓僕らのために心を描くに続けに僕上を渡って過ぎてくさいた誰かのせいでに溶ける花ね君にも見えるだろうきっと重ねた過ち塗り替えるよ何度でもいざ繰り返してくスタートライン過去とは違う